In today's video notes, we're going to look at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. In 1786, Shay's rebellion showed that the Articles of Confederation, the first United States Constitution, was too weak to govern the United States. So the Articles of Confederation, which is the first United States Constitution, didn't have the muscle behind it to deal with problems like Shay's rebellion. It was decided to hold a convention in May of 1787 in Philadelphia to revise, which means update, the Articles of Confederation. But a new constitution was written instead. So at first, the convention in Philadelphia was going to revise the Articles of Confederation, but they decided to get rid of them and write a whole new constitution. James Madison led the movement to write this new constitution and was responsible for the creation of the document. Because of this, he is known as the father of the Constitution. And here's a picture of James Madison, whose nickname was the father of the Constitution. Once the Convention of 1787 started, the delegates began to disagree on three main issues. Now, the word disagree means they began to argue with each other. The first area of disagreement was over the representation in Congress. In the Virginia Plan, also called the Large State Plan, representation will be based on the state's population. So remember, population means the number of people living in a particular state. In the New Jersey Plan, also called the Small State Plan, representation would be equal regardless of a state's size. So in the New Jersey Plan, it didn't make any difference how many people you had living in it. The number of representatives you had would be equal to the large states. The Great Compromise settled the dispute over representation. Now, in a compromise, you give up a little bit of what you want, and then you take a little bit of what you want. And you make both sides happy in the agreement. In the Great Compromise, delegates created a bicameral legislature. This is a two-house legislative body which was called Congress. So the prefix bi means two. So like a bicycle has two wheels, a bicameral legislature has two houses to it. In the House of Representatives, the number of representatives each state has is based on its population. So the House of Representatives is the first house in the bicameral legislature. The House of Representatives is the House of Congress that is affected by the United States Census, which is taken every 10 years. The census is the counting of the total people of the United States and of each state. So every 10 years, a census is taken by the United States government, and again, what a census is, it's the counting of the population. Now this map will show you the effect of a census on a state's membership in the House of Representatives. This is from the 2010 census, which is our last census. And if you look at this information here, it shows you in the dark blue a state that gained 4 representatives because of the population increase. And if you look right here, Texas was that state. Because we have one of the fastest growing populations of the United States, we gained 4 representatives. In the Senate, each state has 2 representatives regardless of its size. So the easiest way to remember this is in the Senate, the numbers are the same. So they both start with the letter S. The Senate is the same, and that number is 2. The Great Compromise divided the new government up into 3 branches. The legislative branch makes the laws, and is made up of Congress. The executive branch enforces the laws and is made up of the President. And the judicial branch interprets the laws, and that's the court system. Another issue which divided the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was the issue of slavery. The Southern states supported slavery and wanted slaves to count for representation purposes, but not for taxation purposes. So the Southern states wanted slaves to count for representation purposes, but not for taxation purposes. The Northern states wanted slaves to count for taxation purposes, but not for representation purposes. So the Northern states wanted slaves to count for taxation, but not for representation. This dispute was solved by the Three-Fifths Compromise. When a census was taken, every 5 slaves would count as 3 people for taxation and representation purposes. So the compromise that settled the dispute over slavery was the Three-Fifths Compromise. And the way this worked is every 5 slaves would be equal to 3 people. The final disagreement at the Constitutional Convention was over the issue of trade. Southern delegates did not want an export or import tariff, which is a tax. So remember, an export is goods going out of a country. Imports are goods coming into a country. And the Southern delegates didn't want a tax on either one of these. Northern delegates favored a tax on imports to help northern industries grow. The South opposed this because it hurt its economy. So people in the North wanted a tax on imports to help its industries. The South didn't like it because they imported a lot of products from other countries, in particular Britain, and they had to pay more for products, which in turn hurt their economies. This dispute was solved by the Commerce Compromise. Congress was given the power to tax imports, but not exports. And because the North feared slave populations in the South would become too high, the importation of slaves would end 20 years from the ratification of the Constitution. So in the Commerce Compromise, it was okay to tax imports, but not exports. The Convention of 1787 accomplished its goal by writing a new Constitution. James Madison's new plan of government now had to be ratified, which means approved, by the states. This would not be easy because not everyone supported this new Constitution.